For some money, you do simple tasks like registering somewhere or writing reviews. I'm always trying to look for something new, constantly searching.
You didn't really get into any courses, and you weren't particularly interested in the topic. Maybe you'll come up with something authentic.
When you finally earn that hard-won money and see your significant profit right there on the screen, it's actually really hard to keep managing things properly after that point. Over the money?
Like, a scalper might even hold positions throughout the day.
Nothing bad will happen here. Nothing happened to me. After all, I'm still here. Upscale basically solves this problem for me by giving me the chance to use my idea even when I don't have the money for it. That's all there is to it.
Our guest today has been working professionally with RTR options since 2017 or 2018. And due to unfortunate circumstances, not everything specific can last forever. Unlike trading, where trading opportunities come up absolutely every day. And that's exactly what motivated me to start my trading journey together with Upscale, specifically with a prop trading platform that lets you manage up to $400,000 in capital without risking your own money. And of course, to realize and maximize your trading potential. As always, this is Igor Fox, and you're on the Upscale channel. Let's go, Alexei. I'm glad to welcome you. Please tell us your name, how old you are, and what you do in life.
Hello, Igor. First of all, thank you for inviting me to take part in such an interesting format for me. As you already said, spoiler alert, my name's Alexei. I'm 29 years old, and I work with crypto airdrops. That's my main focus. Additionally, as part of what I do, there's trading, including prop trading, but not professionally. I wouldn't say it's my main thing. It's not my top priority.
Okay, great. Listen, I know this well. We talked about it before, that you actually got into airdrops in the crypto scene back in 2017. So a lot of people watching us now might have still been in diapers back then. Seriously, if that's the case, please unsubscribe from the channel because you shouldn't be watching this. This is 18 plus contact. So here's what I want to say. You originally started with airdrops back in 2017. First of all, what motivated you? And how did you suddenly go from airdrops to trading? I mean, how did trading start to show up in your life?
That's actually an interesting question. And I've come back to it more than once when people have asked me how I got into crypto. As for how I got into airdrops specifically, I guess it was just a matter of chance, the same way I got into crypto, because one thing kind of led to another, step by step. In 2016, I was working, and even before 2016, I'd say, somewhere around that time, from 2011 to 2016, I was making a little money online. On different sites, there were these things called buck sites. The services were officially called mailing list services. You'd get paid a little money for doing simple tasks, like registering somewhere, writing reviews, and so on. And that's where I saw the word Bitcoin for the first time. There was a task about it, and I'm a curious person by nature, so I went to Google it to find out what this Bitcoin was, this unfamiliar word I didn't know. And it caught my interest. Back then, there wasn't so much structured information. No tons of blogs, articles, or all the visual stuff you see now. Videos explaining how blockchain works, for example, none of that existed yet at the time. I was reading forums, getting curious about who created Bitcoin, who owns it, as I wondered back then, who launched it. I started digging into it. At that time, Bitcoin was, if I'm not mistaken, around $600 to $800, somewhere in that range. This was December 2016, give or take. I registered there, and back then, since I was only working part-time there, at that time, I was a student, working side gigs on different tasks, and it turned out that I registered on a website that paid out fractions of Bitcoin, some Satoshis, for solving CAPTCHAs. I still remember the first time I got something like 600 Satoshis for solving a CAPTCHA once an hour and so on. Later, when all of this became kind of routine for me, I started keeping an eye on what was happening with Bitcoin, what else I could check out there. I even registered on an exchange so I could somehow withdraw, all those kinds of things.
Your rewards.
Yeah, but it wasn't just one site. I had a bunch of different sites. And it wasn't just sites related to Bitcoin or Ethereum. There were similar things like that and so on. By then, I'd already gone familiar with the exchange, started checking things out, and gradually, I noticed that the term airdrop started popping up in my information space. And back then, there were all sorts of opportunities. For those who remember, I wasn't involved in this myself, but people who've been in the space for a long time will remember how popular Bitcoin talk was. If you posted on Bitcoin Talk about different coins, you could earn rewards for that. But I went in a different direction. Specifically, there were all sorts of projects that would just post what you needed to do, what kind of social activity was required, and they would promise some rewards for that. I saw this happening, including some of the very first ones. Everyone says that Telegram channels and chats appeared there much later. Yeah, people talk about 2020 or 2021, but no, even back in 2017 or 2018, though I might be mixing up the years, I was already seeing this, including the Bitcoin. In 2017, it was going up. The industry was slowly developing, and I was kicking myself, trying to bite my own elbows for not buying anything. Well, because I just didn't have the opportunity to buy. I really did think about it. I looked at it as an interesting story, but I just didn't have enough, probably because I was still,
Determined enough?
I just didn't have enough resources yet. I mean, I was a student making just a little money, happy to have some side gigs, just some kind of income. Besides the usual odd jobs and physical work, those side gigs, it just turned out that I simply didn't have the resources back then. What I remember clearly is that in December 2016, I even discussed it with some friends. They still remember it to this day. Maybe some of those people are watching me right now. Yeah, they still
Remember it.
how we used to talk about it in our dorm room. I said that I really should buy that thing. Later, they reminded me about it more than once when it happened. In 2018, 2019. We brought it up more than once after that. And then this whole thing with drops started. I got some airdrops, and some of them never even launched. I mean, they just kind of fizzled out. They launched the coin, but it didn't do anything. I missed the ICO boom. I mean, like I said, I didn't have the resources to invest, so I wasn't even looking in that direction at all, even though ICOs were pretty popular and there were a ton of successful crypto projects. The ones that are successful now, they actually did ICOs, mostly back in 2017. Back then, everything was taken off. And then when I was already, well, I could be wrong, of course, but I think it was around the middle of 2018, somewhere around there. Yeah, something like that. On one of the projects, since I was already active on Telegram, I mean, I was running channels, had my own bots and everything. And I got acquainted with a project. Let me remember the name. I think it's still around. It's called Platin Coin, and it used to give you a few cents for Telegram activities. Basically, if you subscribed to their Telegram, joined the chat, or did something else, you'd get paid. And they actually paid out. And it was pretty easy to, I wouldn't say multi account, but to use it smartly. There was a reward for referrals and more. But there was a high minimum withdrawal threshold. But if you were already familiar with Telegram, it wasn't a problem to rack up referrals. Referrals, now that's probably more of a problem than it was back then. I hit the minimum really fast. I remember it was overnight, I think, and I made about $70 from one project in a single night with instant withdrawal and no strings attached. That's when I really started to believe in this, that you need to try out different projects. Then there was a pause. After some time, because I had to study and work a regular job during the holidays. Then I also traveled abroad. And when I came back from abroad, I realized that everything that used to work for me in terms of side gigs on PTC sites and in Telegram, it just didn't work anymore. I saw it, I worked for a month, and I realized this wasn't a serious thing. And gradually, I started looking back, remembering what about my crypto? What does it look like now? What's going on there? And so when it was already the beginning of 2020, I was abroad again. But I remember I was keeping an eye on this whole thing. In May 2020, that Telegram channel I run now, it launched, and at first it wasn't just about crypto. It was about different ways to make money, like affiliate programs and so on.
By the way, the link will be in the description.
Thanks. In May, I think, though I might be wrong about that. Of course, it was around May when I launched that channel. And gradually, by New Year's, I realized what I was interested in. That year, 2020, I got an airdrop from Uniswap. At that time, it was $1,000 on the day it came out. Because I was already messing around with DeFi, trying to flip some coins, I was already in that space. My information field had already narrowed down, but only to crypto, meaning I could already see that this was what interested me. I thought, let's work in this direction, and by New Year's, I remember the channel's format had already changed. It had switched completely to airdrops, and it was fully focused on airdrops. Basically, nothing but airdrops appeared there, and even that was pretty rare. At the same time, I started making those short instructional videos about airdrops on YouTube. And I realized when the first airdrop started working out in 2021 that I was already in this game full time. I didn't even notice the moment when it completely became part of my everyday life. I honestly don't remember the moment when it all changed. I just remember that it used to be one way and then it became different. That's all there is to it. And then I started doing this every single day, nonstop. I went full time into it. There was still a time in 2021 when I worked a regular offline job, but I didn't last long because what really bothered me was that I had so little time for crypto, way too little time for it. I realized that basically I was doing work that wasn't profitable for me because I knew I could do more here without the risks. I mean, airdrop is less risky than trading and all that. And basically, that's how it was. After 2021, I was already full time in this game. Well, I'd say that this period is still going on right up to now.
So I'm just listening to the story 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, a long journey. And honestly, it's hard to argue with that, especially considering that now it's 2026. I originally asked you, where does trading start to come into play in this whole story?
Trading came into play, I'd say I actually got to that point around 2021. In 2020, there were some attempts to do a bit of trading, but it didn't really work out. In 2021, I'd say I got in pretty deep, or maybe that was still in 2020. Yeah, at the end of 2020, I really got caught up in the whole futures thing and lost a lot. There was this whole thing where trading just became super popular. And I kind of treated the whole thing like, well, I've got airdrops and I'm getting some money from those. While there weren't any other airdrops, I'd use that money to try trading instead of DeFi, which you really have to understand well. It was actually even harder to farm and so on because all those things kept changing. The market in DeFi was shifting every day. I mean, the overall trend was changing and everything gradually shifted. I started trying to trade there, but honestly, it was all pretty unsuccessful. I'd say, well, there weren't any obvious successes. Why was that? Because I was already shaped as a drop hunter, meaning I was specifically looking for airdrops. Trading is a whole different story. It doesn't have much in common with that. With airdrops, you have to think about how to actually get the airdrop. To increase your chances in trading, you need to understand and control a lot of things, including, or probably first and foremost, yourself. You have to understand that your actions don't really affect much because you just open a trade and close a trade. So you don't really have control over this whole thing. And maybe that's why, given my personality and work style, it just didn't quite fit me. After losing money on futures, I realized you have to approach this whole thing with caution. And I started trading, putting a little bit into token sales. Back then, the term whitelist was really popular. That word actually appeared in my vocabulary. In 2021, I think, it was super popular. There were all sorts of IDOs coming out, and you were allowed to participate in them, to put money in. like $50 to $100. There was this whole thing with CoinList. I only got involved after the hype had already died down, like after Flow came out and made a ton of X's. By then, I was putting money into later projects. Some of them paid off, some didn't. There was Casper, then what else did I invest in? Clover, I think, was around at that time, and Rally, which ended up rug pulling to zero. What else? Somewhere else, Humanity Protocol. I think I took part in that too. But as for trading, how did that go? I started trading like I'd go to sleep and trade, just building up my portfolio that way. It was a really, really, really bad time for me to get into all this because that was right at the end
Of 2020, that was the beginning.
of the year. And that's when the airdrops happened. I'd say it was a ton of profit, and it would have stayed profit if it weren't for portfolio investing. I did manage to catch some coins here and there that gave me big returns, but that was more of a rare thing. Even now, I still have the coins I bought at the end of 2021. Not all of them. Some positions I closed out, but the ones that are really in the red, I'm still holding on to. It's like I'm carrying everything with me the whole way, carrying all my stuff with me. I've had
Ripple, Shiba, and Atom since then. Needless to say, only Ripple has bounced back. Well, everything else is down 90%, right?
I get what you mean. My portfolio is much broader, much bigger, and minus 90% is probably the mildest loss I have, honestly. Well, not exactly. Of course, there are some coins that are doing okay. Some have managed to recover, but the ones that maybe should have been sold off, I did end up taking some profits there or reduce my positions in some places. That was already a kind of trading. And after that, it was the start of what I'd call an interesting time when I kind of understood what I wanted to do and what I was after, but still, I wanted to broaden my horizons. There were attempts to learn something new, to explore, but I can say miss. And to this day, it's really not my thing. It's definitely not for me. Probably because of how my mind works, because it's psychologically hard for me. Actually, I wouldn't even say it's hard for me. During the process of opening and closing a trade, it's hard for me to focus so that nothing distracts me so I can actually enter the trade. And in the same way, it's really hard for me afterwards when all my trades are closed. I realize I should go and check what's going on there. It's hard for me to even make myself go and look at all of that. Well, as for trading, like I said, there was also this story where we were holding on to those airdrops. And one way or another, you try to figure out where it'd be better to sell a certain coin, right? Or maybe buy it back during the dump and so on. And this whole thing, how does it work? I analyzed projects, looked into what had happened with them in the past, what kind of team they had on board. As for futures, I was kind of wary of them after 2020. I mean, by then, I already understood exactly what it was all about. I'd had enough. It seemed strange to me coming from experienced people back then. Like, I'd listen to them, they'd tell me things. I'd listen to them and they'd say, oh, no, don't mess with futures. That stuff will definitely burn you to the ground at some point. And I think, well, it shouldn't. Everything's fine. We watch, we open, we close. I thought, it's all okay. But then when I actually dealt with it, all my questions disappeared. I understood exactly what they meant. I actually got into trading kind of unexpectedly, even for myself. So I started posting some trades there, but honestly, not very successfully. It didn't really work out. I wouldn't even say I don't present myself as a full fledged, experienced trader. I'm more of an enthusiast, someone who manages to pull things off here and there.
This whole story, I want to point out that here we are recording an interview, and it says up top, our capital, your trading potential, and at the bottom, it says Upscale. This is all prop trading. So how did it even happen that you got into prop trading? How'd you end up there? What would be your overall comment compared to what you had before? Over the past 8 years?
It happened completely by accident while I was on Telegram. I stumbled upon it, and it was all about timing because at that moment, my spot portfolio was in the red, and airdrops weren't bringing the kind of profits they used to. There was also a lack of more dynamic content on the channel, which I would have liked to see. And there was just a total lack of anything new. Nothing new was happening. Everything was just going along as usual. I figured, when would there ever be a better time than now when there's so little capital anyway, way less than in previous years, when what you made from airdrops, honestly, some people just make me laugh. There are these specific types of commenters I get, and they say things like, well, it's still fine. Like this airdrop came out, that airdrop came out, but this one's bad. And I tell them I can't have bad ones because I do this full time. So I need this to be consistent. If I manage to make money somewhere, I'm happy. That's actually how Upscale came into the story because I realized that if I have the opportunity to trade with capital that I don't actually have, or even if I do have it, I can't risk it because maybe tomorrow I'll need to eat somehow. Actually, not maybe, I'll definitely need to eat, right? And I'll have to get,
Salads, cucumbers.
unfortunately, salads and cucumbers, they also kind of,
Cost money too.
yeah, you have to get them from somewhere too. That's why I can't touch the capital that's set aside, even conditionally, for me just to live, just to exist, I'd say. You have to cover some basic needs. But I just said it like that, exist. No, of course not. You need to be able to pay for your needs, even if they're just basic ones, just so you can at least be somewhat comfortable, to feel at home in your place, to make sure everything's okay here, that you have enough of everything, and so on. That's why I didn't really want to risk the capital. Didn't want to, and that's when Upscale came into the picture. I got to know it in the fall, if I'm not mistaken, of 25. There was an attempt to figure out what it was and how it worked. So basically, it was my first platform. I wasn't familiar with others. I knew what it was and how it worked because, like I said, if I came across a word somewhere, like it was with Bitcoin, so if I saw the word prop trading, I needed to know what it meant. Because what's the point of reading some article if I don't even understand what it's about? And so Upscale was a discovery for me in terms of how it works, to try it out. I read up on it, looked around, checked out some reviews, and went for it. With my first challenge in the fall,
That's how
I got into it.
I get it. I understand your motivation. The market is pretty bleak, but here's something new and interesting that could potentially solve a problem. Even if it's not exactly in the field that resonates with you, it's still an area where you've had some success. So, before we take a closer look at your experience with Upscale, what'd you get out of it? I got capital to manage and started withdrawing 2.5% of the capital per month, which is 30% per year. So, that's the annual return I'm getting. Let's take a look at what you've achieved over these 5 years. Your experience in trading? Let's open up the trading terminal, for example, or Upscale, and you can walk us through your trading strategies. Because from what I understand, from what I've heard, you didn't really get into courses and you weren't especially interested in the topic. Maybe you'll have something authentic to share.
I really didn't dive into them, but I was interested in the topic. I was always trying to listen to more experienced people, watching some podcasts. For me, it was a story where I was interested in it, but I understood that I just wasn't capable of fully committing to it. I'm very aware of what I can handle and what I can't. So maybe I'm just the kind of person who dismisses things, and I don't really have any doubts about what I think about it. Even now, I still think it's not really my thing, but it's something I could force myself to do if I had to, rather than I could, in principle, do it.
As an additional source.
Well, like I said, there was also a lack of new content for me, including on my channel. I just wasn't interested in simply trading futures or things like that. That whole thing just wasn't for me. It didn't resonate with me. And with prop trading, I realized that people just don't have capital right now, including my subscribers. A lot of people don't. I saw people writing that airdrops are basically dead at the moment. Like back in 2025, that was all me. Every time a new project came out and did an airdrop, I'd read comments like, well, that's it, airdrops are definitely over. I realized I needed to try something new for myself because I can't stay in a constantly negative environment. I kind of need to try something. And that's not just about upscaling, it's about right now, too. I'm trying something new besides crypto. Well, not exactly besides crypto. Using my skills from airdrops and crypto, I'm always trying to look for something new, but I don't always have enough time for that. Luckily, when the market's bad and airdrops are bad, there's plenty of time.
All right, all right. Let's dive into trading strategies. Chatterbox.
The strategy I've been using lately, well, it doesn't really overlap with my spot trading at all. And that's important for me right now. So, from what you said, here's what came out of it. As it actually turns out, the figure comes to about 2.5% per month. Now, looking closely at my specific investment strategy, the exact one that led me to these 2.5%, there was absolutely nothing supernatural or mysterious about how it works. I just use a single indicator. That's it. But besides that, of course, I also assess the situation based on what I've seen in the market before. I'll talk more about that a bit later. I also have the Bollinger Band technical indicator, which has a variety of customized settings, and there's the upper and lower boundary version. In essence, I really appreciate your time and thank you. It shows things in real time. Here, it's at the bottom for me. This whole thing, like when bear appears and when the word bull shows up, bullish, that's when you buy. I use this approach. In what way? The Bollinger itself shows at the current moment based on the volumes and the dynamics happening. As for how the indicator technically works, dear viewers, you can look it up yourselves. There are different variations of its settings, as I understand it. I've had the same setting for a very long time. I just won't go into the details. In one of the communities, you might even recognize it by the name. In one of the communities, they simply gave the indicator to the community partners. I got this indicator and it's just set up very conveniently. So it's a standard indicator, just modified a bit. I installed it for myself. And so when I was doing my second basic challenge, I decided to try working a bit with this strategy. And as you can see right here, I successfully received my funding from the initial evaluation challenge.
I'd like to ask you, how do you usually go about it? Do you usually hold your trades for a long time? Or are you more of a scalper, maybe holding positions just during the day?
It all depends on how the coin behaves and how much it moves, yeah, in one direction or another. Usually, I set my stop loss at 15% for a trade, not more than 15%. Lately, I don't allow stop losses at all, so there can't be any arguments about it with me. Maybe if I made a mistake and the trade goes down by 15%, I just stop looking at it. Moreover, I try to sort the coins in my watch list. If a coin hits my stop once and then again, and I'm trading it using Bollinger Bands, I just remove it from my watch list and add another one instead. That way, I keep shuffling coins that move regularly. Regarding the duration of trades, I can say that it all depends on how my account is doing. Basically, if I want to have a profitable day and I see that I can close it out right now, I might close it a little earlier. About the duration. So, for example, the trade I opened, I'll check. I actually have one open right now. I opened it back on April 2nd.
You've been holding it for 4 days?
Yeah, I've been holding it for 4 days because this is a coin that really likes to. Dash is one of those coins that likes to mess with you. By the way, with this instrument, if I remember right, when I was still doing the challenge before I got funded, I had most of my main results, I think, were connected to Dash because it really likes to do that. That's why I say that besides Bollinger, there are also some local patterns. I watch this coin a lot because I used to arbitrage it for a while. If you look at Dash, just Dash itself, you can see what was happening with it at the beginning of November. So here it went from $50 to $150. That's a 3x in a market that doesn't even smell like alt season. Just open it up and see. At the same time, look at Bitcoin, which everything else follows. Just open it up too. At the very beginning in November, you'll see that none of those stories happened here. So there weren't any crazy pumps or anything like that. Another one of these instruments, which unfortunately isn't on my watch list right now, and I'm not trading at the moment, is Monero, which often moves against the market. If we talk about Dash, you can compare it to more stable altcoins like Litecoin. It also showed some results here, but specifically with Dash, I want to point out the date, November 2nd, when Dash gave a 3 times, while Litecoin. So, how much did it drop here anyway? Well, minus 15% at the time, right? That's why I really, really like Dash. I can remind you, and anyone can point out to me that it doesn't always happen this way, and I agree. But these impulses, they happen specifically with Dash and Monero. At the same time, Zcash was really standing out, and there was this narrative about privacy again. So I also pay attention to narratives, but Dash often stands out against the market, even if just a little in certain situations. I'll explain why I keep an eye on it. It's because for a while I was really into arbitraging it, so I had to watch it closely. I mean, I haven't really mentioned this before, but just a little bit. For the past few years, I've been trying to catch some arbitrage opportunities on smaller exchanges, but that's a whole other story. If trading is a certain percentage of all my activity, then arbitrage is even less than that. So arbitrage really isn't my thing at all. I'm just involved in it from time to time. That's all. So, how does Ollinger itself work? These red ones here, for example, on my screen, that's how I have it set up. This is a setup from Crypto Family. If by any chance Yura Francisco is watching us, let's send him our regards and say thank you. This is a setup from Crypto Family. I just wanted to mention that because otherwise people will say you kept talking and talking, but never said what indicator it was.
Yeah, that's true. If someone wants to find it, they will. If someone doesn't want to,
They'll definitely find it.
I'm sure of it.
How does it work? When do these labels appear? That's still not a reason to jump in right away. But if you look at it in hindsight, how does it look? The BIR label started flashing and there was some small movement. But this is a daily chart. If you open the chart for 1 hour, which I use the 1 hour time frame. It doesn't always work because I don't actually trade on that beer label. I trade when there's a clear signal at the upper boundary. This upper boundary indicates overbought conditions. In other words, at that moment, the asset is considered overbought by the market and by a bunch of data that's built into this indicator, like volumes and so on. It shows that if there's an upper boundary, at that moment, it most likely looks overvalued. That's why this red indicator lights up. That's exactly what this is about. Just like this. This is basically the upper boundary from where, as we can see, there was a drop here, but then the price started to rise again. Now, someone might say to me, but look, after that, the price keeps rising, so the indicator doesn't work. Actually, that's how the indicator works. Not always, but in most cases. When it makes a mistake here, for example, with Dash, it gave a bullish signal, but still, if you trade short term and take small positions, which isn't really my thing, it still, as you can see, predicted something, even if it was pretty weak. But if you switch over and look at how it signals, sometimes it's spot on. For example, with Aptos, we reached the upper boundary, and right here you can see it dropped to 0.89 from 0.91. So it does show some results. An important point, people will say, but this isn't reliable. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
And it really looks more like signal trading than analysis.
This is signal trading. But there's an important point. When you hit a stop, that's when you end up with minus 15%. But when this happens, I'm not sure. Let me try. I'll just open my trade history right now and see if I had anything good so I can. Okay, that's it. With Polkadot, this approach worked more consistently, as you can see. Here it was spot on. As soon as there was a signal, it was much higher. We didn't move up from here if you look. Basically, it was just pennies here, and then we went higher. So there was a short signal here, much higher, but we didn't go up. And then when another short signal came in, the move lasted for a whole 4%. And I was trading there with, say, 5 times leverage. But I always cut my losses. Or rather, yeah, that's right. I cut my losses. What I mean is, I might not set any target at all, but I'm constantly moving my stop. If I see that my trade is already up 15%, for example, with 5 times leverage, you only need about a 3% price move for that. With just a 3% price move, that's already a 7.5% gain. So I'll set my stop there. Not even at break even, but somewhere around plus 7.5 or plus 8%. I see how I assess the situation as it unfolds, or I keep moving my stop if the price movement is really strong. If it's up, I don't know, 40%, 50%, then I move my stop to plus 20, plus 30%. As a result, that's what I ended up with for the month. Just these modest couple of percent, but honestly, with absolutely no stress at all, I'd say. There's also a situation when you can really see it clearly on Dota. Look how many times it flashed bullish here, but the price kept going down. But in the end, it did reach the boundary. And look how delayed that reaction was. So it goes on for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Rule 6. And how do you filter that? So, like I said, it really looks a lot like signal-based trading. Do you have any additional factors you rely on before entering a trade? Or is it just that an arrow appears and that's it? No.
If at the moment the market is calm, there's no news shaking things up, nothing's really happening, no big swings or anything like that, yeah, I go through my watch list, I don't have any open trades, and I see my indicator flashing, then I try to enter a trade. If the trade gets stopped out because the whole market suddenly takes off somewhere. Of course, I take a pause. I don't rush to reopen a position. A clear example of this is what sometimes happens with Bitcoin in this context. With Bitcoin, signals rarely light up here. What we see are just the boundaries. I'd say this happens much less often here than with altcoins, but I also rarely open trades on it. So I trade Bitcoin less. I'm more interested when I can grab bigger percentage gains specifically on altcoins, but that's just my strategy. And even if I have an open, let's say on some coin, let's take RTS for example. If I have a long position open somewhere on RTS, and here's a clear example, if the short indicator lights up here, I already have my stop set. Yeah, like I said, I gradually move it up while the price is rising, so I'm locking in my profit. So even if I see that the indicator lights up red on the chart, showing that the asset is overvalued, I still just keep my stop where it is. I let the structure break down however it wants to. You see, if something like that happened here, there would still be a lot of profit left at the top, even though the indicator is already signaling to short. But as we can see, Aptos completely breaks this pattern. So if I got in here and held on, and my stop never got hit, I just keep the position open no matter what happens. So I've already secured my profit, I've got some gains locked in. And then it turns out that that's why sometimes trades stay open for several days, because the Bollinger started flashing there. I've protected my profit with a stop, so everything's fine, and I'm ready to hold it longer. But there are exceptions. If I see that all the altcoins are really tanking, I might close out early. Or sometimes I go to sleep with my stop set, and when I wake up, there's been a huge move in one direction or the other, but if it's in my favor, I can close the position instantly. Catching a move like that in real time is really tough. Yeah, it's really hard to know, and honestly, I don't think you can really analyze it at all. Yeah, for me, that's a tough situation. You have to study a ton of things just to catch that kind of impulse. If I miss that impulse, but I see that I can already close out, then I just go ahead and close without carrying anything over.
So, when your trading day starts, you have a clean slate. You have the Bollinger indicator turned on. And then you go through your clean slate and check whether the Bollinger is showing a short or long signal, and you look at it everywhere. So, if the indicator is consistently showing either a short or long movement across the board, then you decide, yes, it really is time to enter the trade. Which asset do you usually try to enter on? So, if I understand correctly, you only enter trades when the market is screaming everywhere that this is the situation. No.
Not exactly. Actually, I try to. For me, it's actually not appealing when all the coins look the same and are moving in one direction. That rarely happens with the indicator, of course, but sometimes it does happen that the indicator lights up on a lot of coins at once. If I see that the whole market, let's say, looks like it does now, like for example, A and Mix are up, and we had X up there, and Bread is up too. And if everything on my watch list is showing, say, +3, +2, +1%, and there are a bunch of coins on the watch list, for example, take BSV, for example. If it lights up, like you said, when everything else has been going up across the board, if the green indicator lights up for it, then I'm interested in buying it because I can see it's lagging behind the rest of the market. But what if I see that the green indicator is lit up for all the coins, but they've already gone up and there's really no difference between them? I try not to get involved in that situation at all. I have no desire to jump in just for the sake of jumping in. Like, if for me, the information from the watch list isn't enough, if that's not enough for me, then I just leave it alone. I mean, I don't react in any way. I just think, okay, let's wait for better opportunities in the market.
With all that in mind, it turns out that I don't use trend zones, support, or resistance, just exactly what I listed before.
For me, I want the news background to be more or less calm because I really don't want to play guessing games at all. If the news background is calm overall, actually, you could say it's not just about the watch list's overall behavior. It's about the whole market because basically the watch list won't be much different from, say, the general market. If you look at the top 100 by market cap, then in terms of capitalization, everything will look more or less the same. But if I see for myself that there aren't any anomalies happening, and I see that the market is more or less calm, with this indicator, I can catch a small impulse and then play it out further by just trailing it out, constantly moving the stop. And
Let's switch over to Upscale. You can show your certificates, we'll see what you've achieved, and I'll start asking you about what was going on with you there.
right here, we have Upscale, the platform itself, and here are two of our currently open trades. At the moment, yeah,
Show me your. Yeah, let's start with the certificates. Take a look at them first, then we'll move on to the trades.
Yeah, so back on February 17th, I finally got funded after finishing my very first challenge. To be honest, I actually couldn't complete the basic one before because, well, right now, things are just starting to click for me. That's interesting. That's a quick summary of my luck. My first challenge was going on, and that's exactly what got hit. On October 10th, there was a major crash.
A parallel.
Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, that's exactly what happened to me. I think one of my long positions got stopped out. It just finished me off back then. My account was already in bad shape. It wasn't okay, I think. Either I didn't have a stop loss set, or maybe I did. I don't remember. But I think that's what finished me off on October 10th. And then I came back to take on the next challenge. By then, I was experimenting in different ways. I mean, I was trading. With Bollinger, I only traded with it in this particular challenge. For me, it all kind of started with passing this challenge. And on February 17th of this year, I got funded on Upscale. The next certificate, wait, that's not the one. Here it is, the first one. On March 4th, exactly 2 weeks later, I got my first payout ever. 111.
Dollars.
Yeah. That was from the prop account, the basic 10K one. And then 15 days later, so March 19th, basically 2 weeks later, I'm not sure about the exact date, but it was exactly 2 weeks. because I have the check mark for the 14-day period and then another $168.
I see. Yeah. So in total, the withdrawal ended up being $280 from the $10,000 challenge. So that's not even 2.5%. It's actually 2.8% after deduction. If you extrapolate that over a year, the yield comes out to about 30 to 35%, which actually is, according to certain industry standards, and because your account is large, these microscopic percentages, as many people might think, including viewers who are used to pulling in 3 to 400% PNL, start to feel significant. Because when you have $100 and say you make 3%, well, now you have $103. Overall, well, it's still a result, but it's kind of unnoticeable.
But that's exactly why I needed to change my overall strategy, because I realized that trading with a capital of $10,000 is very different from when you just set aside, say, $100 or $200 for trading, take half of that amount, and put it into a trade. So I don't approach it that way here. Like that. I'll show you. Soon you'll see what amounts I'm opening trades with. So I don't know if these are all the trades, but it says end of list here. I guess that's all of them. As you can see, on February 19th, there were two trades. But if you look here, the margin was $200, $220. That's considering we have $10,000 in the account, but actually only a small percentage of the capital is being used. And that's how I was proceeding. As you can see, the start was, let's say, gentle. Honestly, it wasn't a very successful start. There were some losses at first, but as you can see, when things started moving in the right direction, here's that short on Fortcoin where the margin was $300 and I managed to close it with a profit of 124. So you can see where I lose 3 times in a row, about 30 each time, roughly speaking. I cover one loss successfully, and then everything started to even out, as you can see here. So, for example, with Kaita, the margin was 400, and I closed with a loss of $72. But after that, when things started to turn around, I'd say that was just luck. It finally started going my way. So these 3 losses in a row, 3 in a row like that, that's actually pretty rare. But it did happen to me again later.
What percentage of your deposit do you usually risk? To start things off, could you explain basically what your typical risk reward ratio looks like? And at what specific levels do you typically choose to place your stop loss during the challenge? I am also curious to know if your overall trading approach underwent any significant changes, or did you already have your main set of rules firmly established after your first loss and managed to consistently follow them throughout the process?
My approach really did change, but it changed after I had already completed the challenge. It was only after the first 2 weeks, when I closed in profit, that I realized I needed to feel a bit more confident, so I started opening positions with slightly higher margin. So the second payout, why is it bigger? It's because I did everything the same, but I tried to add a bit more margin, just a little more, but not too much. The win streak, there it is, right on the screen. By the way, in the end, the losing streak ended up wiping all of that out completely. So, like I said, that's the very definition of stability. Everything here looks more or less stable and clear. There are wins, there are losses. My approach changed. It changed after I passed the challenge. I realized I was heading in the right direction, but what did I do? I started making fewer trades. Now, for example, when I closed out 2 weeks in a row with a profit, 2 weeks, well, the second 2 weeks also ended in profit, and I got both my payouts. I focused on the idea that, it's not that I need to trade more to earn more. Instead, I need to cut out the trades that didn't work for me, and then everything will be fine. The win streak I had was still connected to that period. Like, you can see there was a trade on the 18th and on the 19th, and 2 whole trades on the 20th. There was a trade on the 21st, too. So you see, these were all small amounts. Regarding the risk reward, I try to open, well, with 10,000, I try to open no more than the maximum, probably $600, with a risk of 15% of $600. That is no more. From $600, 15% is $90 for us.
Less than 1%. From deposit to transaction?
Yes, for the deal. In a trade, I can use up to 6%. But $600 is an exception. That actually happened. I was really confident. I thought I could reopen the position. In the moment when I see that I've already missed several times, I might, let's say, my standard margin. So I usually start from a $300 trade, but I might open for $350 or $400. So it all also depends on whether things were working out for me before or not. But if I see the same coin where I keep missing the entry, usually it just gets removed from my watch list if I miss it too often. I try to keep it constantly shuffled. There's no fixed list. I'm always adding or removing things so it doesn't get too comfortable. At the moment, I come to the conclusion that if I miss the entry on a coin, even though that hadn't happened before, there's a good chance that the next time the indicator lights up, it'll actually perform well. But again, as I've already explained, this isn't my main method of analysis. I generally watch how coins behave in the market overall. If the market is stable and everything's going well, then there's a higher probability. What is trading anyway? Basically, we're trading probabilities. We pick a side and study the probability of whether the price will go up or down. That's exactly how it works for me here, too.
Try it out.
It's the kind of thing where you're often tempted to go on tilt, smash your screen, or do something else impulsive. And usually, the people who actually make it to payouts are the ones who've learned how to deal with that. Because otherwise, you end up in a situation where you take $10,000, use 5 times leverage, put it all together, and then, thanks to some unlucky turn of events, things don't go your way and your account is gone. So as a result, you won't be doing interviews with me. Those kinds of people just don't make it here. How do you deal with your emotions when you go on a losing streak? What do you do to keep yourself from falling into that? Into that revenge trading phase and all that?
I'd say it's really about having emotional self control. Basically, you don't let your emotions take over your thinking. You need to clearly separate what you're thinking about from your emotional state. Because what is trading really? It's numbers. In my case, it's an indicator. A lot of people will look at it and think, I'm sure they'll think this, that what I use just isn't enough. But that's exactly the filtering, and that's why I'm here. Like you said, I came to this interview because I didn't blow up my account. Well, let's say if you need a bunch of indicators that you think give you more accurate signals and you use them with a lot of confidence, then you probably need more tools and more time for your analysis. And as a result, you're expecting more profit from it. That's why you'll end up putting a lot into it. And there's a good chance you'll end up crashing into a wall. That's a clear filter. Now let's talk about emotions and so on. It was really hard for me. I had times when I was trading meme coins, and there was this one story in particular. What I noticed was that there are limits to how much you can make there, especially when you've already earned something. But there were stories with insane, absolutely crazy multipliers. And when you've made that money and you see your profit on the screen, it's really hard to keep managing your money properly after that. You start thinking, well, I've already made money. I already have some, so I can risk it here and risk it there too. And that only leads to one thing. It's always the same story. You lose everything, a complete wipeout, absolutely everything. You'll even lose what you already had. I had a situation like that myself, but I didn't lose everything. I managed to get my emotions under control. I guess that constant toughening up helped too. And after that whole story, the unfortunate one in 2020 and everything that followed, I remember it all very clearly. You see, I even remember the years, the dates, give or take, even the time of year, because it was such an emotionally tough experience for me. How do I decompress emotionally and practice abstinence? First of all, I don't treat this as entertainment. It might seem like I'm just doing something simple, looking at charts and indicators. Some people might say, really? That I don't actually have any real work to do. But I get tired very quickly when I think about all of this. It really puts a significant strain on me. I try my best, and this is probably some very important advice for everyone watching this video right now. When you feel emotionally off or just not like you usually do, especially when you're not feeling calm and acting as you normally would, on those specific days, it's much better not to touch any trading terminals at all. And honestly, it's not even about the leverage you are using, it's about your mindset. I always have a standard approach to every situation in the market, but if I notice that I start to feel a desire somewhere deep down to do something, I shut it down right away. If I feel the urge to open a trade just because I don't have any open positions, I simply close the terminal. Because if that urge comes up, it means there aren't enough situations in the market that you can actually use to your advantage, and you start making them up. What does that look like emotionally?
Basically, you spent time but got no results, so you feel like you need to get some kind of outcome.
What does that look like emotionally? You're used to getting rewarded for your work, that little hit of dopamine, which is basically the norm for anyone in crypto. When you do something, you get a reward for it. And when there's no reward for a day, 2 days, 3 days, for some people, and I'm speaking from my own experience, some people need that reward every hour, not just every day. They need to have trades going all the time. They want those little green lights flashing. And good for them if they can actually trade like that. But all of this leads to bad consequences because the market is always changing in the same. And it seems like the same situations work out differently. And it turns out that emotionally, you end up thinking, I'll just open a trade because I don't have any open trades, or I'll open a trade because I need money. That's probably the dumbest thing you can do. Justifying opening a trade by saying you need money right now. How do I deal with that? I don't really know the right way to deal with it, but I feel like I'm on the right track. I try, well, first and foremost, I need to be in my usual state of mind. If I'm coming back from somewhere, let's say I just got back from fishing or from a birthday party or something, then I'm either really tired emotionally or in a really good mood because I had a great time. So I probably need to cool down before I even open anything, even just to scroll through my watch list, let alone open the trading terminal. To open my watch list, I need to cool down. I need to be in the right state of mind. Right now, for example, nothing is distracting me, nothing is stressing me out. I feel fine. It's a normal day for me. I mean, I've slept, I've eaten, I feel good. Everything's okay. When it comes to unwinding, this balance is really important. Again, it's a more probably individual thing. For me, sports help a lot, just leaving all the negativity and the weights right there in the gym. As for when I get the urge to go on a losing streak, I treat the money in the terminal as if it's money I'll actually need for my life. I don't see it as just numbers on a screen, and it's the same with P&L and all that. If I see a profit or a loss, I treat it as real money that was just earned or lost. When you have the right approach to your capital, when you're fully aware of what's happening, when you're really honest with yourself, aware of the amount involved, it works both ways. At the same time, you realize when you've made a mistake and how much you've lost. Well, whether it's a lot or a little, yeah. Well,
Like, for example, you just missed out on 2 Snickers bars.
yeah, that's actually a really good way to look at it. I mean, it's a really good approach to evaluate things by thinking about what you could buy with that money, what you could actually afford. That's also a good way to look at it. Or when you get the thought, I'll hold on to this trade no matter what. I won't move my stop, even though the trade is already way in the green. Convert it to your own currency, the one you use, and see how much you actually have in your open trade. Maybe it's a month's rent, maybe it's a full tank of gas or diesel. So it's really important to understand that too. And when everything is tied to real things, to everyday life, basically, I think it just doesn't belong. But a lot of people have it. I have these, Urges. Like I said, when I was trading shitcoins, I started to notice in myself that this was purely it's a story about doing it just for the sake of doing something with it. For me, as soon as I told myself that in my head, that was it. I made an agreement with myself. I can see that this is no longer. It's an unhealthy situation, and no one from the outside can help you here because you'll always feel like you're basically following a sound strategy. Everything's fine. I'll just open a bigger position to make more money. But you have to question everything and ask yourself, what if I'm wrong? And as Charlie Munger said in his book, he talked about how people feel that if they do more, take more actions, it will lead to greater success. But in reality, it's probably more important to be in the flow, cut out all the noise, and focus only on what's truly worthwhile.
I think that was more than comprehensive regarding the perception of the market and negativity. And I think we're already getting close to the end now. A bit more of you. And finally, since we're on the Upscale channel, I'd like to hear from you. What does prop trading give you compared to trading with your own money? And
The first place, I'll say what Upscale gives me. For me, it's a unique story because this is my first prop platform. Let's put it this way, I actually learned what it is here. What does it give me right now? A very positive aspect. That for me, even if I set aside all the indicators and so on, if I see something interesting in the market where I'd like to enter, I don't necessarily have to use some kind of locked up capital, so to speak, that's set aside for that purpose. But again, prop trading is also operational, paying for different services, proxies, anti detect browsers, and so on. So money is constantly going there too. And when you have a trading idea but don't have your own capital for it, prop trading is a great way to handle that. Also, I'd even say that maybe it could serve as a kind of hint or clue. I was just thinking about this for everyone. A lot of people hedge their positions, right? And in order to hedge your position, let's say, for example, if you have somewhere your money's stuck in a sale. So you know the pre market price there, but the coins aren't available to you yet. It's harder to hedge there because the coin isn't being traded yet. So you have to open its pre market. But if you're withdrawing, say, some arbitrage coins somewhere, coins that are traded on Upscale, for example, you can also hedge that on Upscale. And you don't need to overthink it, which I see people do a lot. Hedging positions where people start overanalyzing, thinking about what kind of leverage to use or how much more or less capital to put in. Upscale basically solves that problem for me and lets me take advantage of an idea I don't have the money for. That's it, really. In short, that's probably how it is.
yeah, that's cool. Really cool. Opening up new horizons, doors, and opportunities. Good, good. So, to wrap up the interview, let me ask you, what are you striving for, traveler?
Oh, that's a tough question because about a year ago, yeah, most likely about a year ago, something happened that actually changed my path a little bit. I'll tell you, it made me feel freer because I can't really say exactly what I'm heading toward. A friend of mine asked me recently, we hadn't talked in a while, and he said, "How are you? What are you up to?" I told him something brilliant. I was in a big rush, totally worn out, just coming home, and I sent him a voice message. I said, "Listen, I'm doing something, I'm heading somewhere, but honestly, I have no idea where I'm actually going. Time will tell. My job is just to keep moving forward. That's it, more or less."
Not to stop.
Yeah, for me, about a year ago, I realized that I more or less understood what I was working toward. Now it's changed a bit. Like, do I still value it? Yeah, I started asking myself, do I really want this? It kind of seems like if I keep the old goal, then it turns out that the path I'm on is nothing like before, that I'm not even heading in the same direction anymore, at least not for that old goal. I guess I'm gradually moving toward more and more freedom and understanding of myself. At the same time, along the way, I try to hold on to what I already have, just not stopping. That's it, really. I don't have a clear goal, but I know I can't stop. I don't have a clear goal. Lately, it's been hard to answer that question. The goal is not to stop.
What kind of specific advice would you personally give to those who really want to follow in your professional footsteps, especially in the world of trading or crypto? Just to put it briefly, what would you advise them?
I honestly don't think I could say I'm the absolute best or most qualified person to offer any kind of expert advice. Probably because that would seem a bit unusual or even slightly strange. But still, if what I said resonates with someone, then I'd probably advise not to lose yourself, not to forget that besides the trading terminal and the screen with airdrops, crypto, or whatever else, there's real life. There are your loved ones, your family, and in the end, there are things worth paying attention to beyond just indicators and news. There are things life just flows by. Today, for example, is Monday. There will never be another Monday like this one. It's one of the kind in nature. That's what my economics professor used to say. That's why I remember him so often. The very first piece of advice is not to forget that life is fleeting and everything that passes by while you're focused on your own business. The second piece of advice, probably first and foremost, is to listen to yourself more than to everything else, all the other noise, because your path and what you get in life come from what you want. To achieve what you want, news, advice from others, they just won't get you because every person should be an individual. You can't say that everyone has the same dream. If two people dream of a Lamborghini, chances are they don't even want it in the same color. So everyone wants something different. You have to listen to yourself and give yourself advice. Always keep learning something new and don't be afraid. Keep learning, keep trying, don't be afraid, and don't be afraid to get a few bruises along the way. From falling down along the way, it's just that as you learn, you become stronger. And the good thing about failures is when you have 10 of them, they're unpleasant. But when you have 100, they don't hurt at all anymore. They just don't cause you any pain anymore. You remember, I failed there. I failed there too. So what? Maybe I won't succeed here either. It's no big deal. Nothing happened to me. After all, I'm still here. In the end, I got through all those failures. So, not being afraid to make mistakes and constantly learning is probably the best thing. This applies to crypto, and not just crypto. In life, make choices for yourself. Don't listen to anyone else. Choose for yourself, because in the end, you'll have to come to terms with yourself when you reach the end of your journey. You'll have to come to terms with yourself about where you ended up. In other words, you'll have to decide if you're satisfied with what you've achieved. Not a blogger, not an influencer. You'll be the one asking yourself if you like where you've arrived. You'll be the one asking yourself, think about that.
And on that motivational note, I suggest we wrap up our interview and thank you for sharing your experience. To all our viewers, I don't know, give us a like, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, turn on all notifications. Write in the comments what you liked about Alexi's speech, what stood out to you. And of course, don't forget about the links in the description, because everything you ever felt was missing is there.
I'll add that if there's something you didn't like, you can write that in the comments too. I'm not a big fan of that, but it really helps promote any video. Honestly, I just want to say thank you for inviting me. I'd also like to wish the audience good luck. May everything work out for you. Come on in. Trade. Give it a try if you feel you have the strength and the opportunity. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's truly a pleasure. Sorry if I didn't meet your expectations somewhere along the way. I think I have the right to that. Maybe. Maybe I'll drop by this channel again, and I'll have something new to share with you.
Listen, we'll be right here waiting for you. We really can't wait to see you. To wrap everything up, let me just say my signature phrase one more time. I'll see you at the very top.
Bye, everyone.